everybody. My name is Matt Skudera with the Credit Research Foundation. We're here with a special guest today, Peter Hodges, who is going to speak with us on a very great topic. Peter, I want to welcome you to Where Credit is Due. We're glad to have you with us again. You've been with us in the past, and our experience and the topic you had shared with us on leadership just was absolutely outstanding. And your book, White Blaze Leadership, uses a number of metaphors. One in particular is on trail markers, and we want to talk about leadership in everyday life using that metaphor and use it not only from a pure leadership standpoint, but make sure that you're using it in your office and in your everyday life, which would be absolutely just phenomenal. Before we jump in, give your listeners, maybe those that are new to your work, those that haven't read your book or haven't seen you speak, some detail on where you can go to try to solve those issues on leadership, share maybe some of the opportunities that you see, but really focused on those that are faced with white blaze leadership, leading back to the book and the topic that you just speak so well on.
Matt, Mike, it's great to be here with you today and appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and with your listening audience here. Peter Hodge, and I never set out to write a book on leadership. In fact, it was probably the furthest thing from my mind when I took my first step onto the Appalachian Trail 5 years ago now. For those of you not familiar with the Appalachian Trail, it's a 2,200 mile long wilderness trail that runs from just outside Atlanta in Georgia all the way up to almost the Canadian border in northern Maine. It's an extraordinary, phenomenal part of the country. And I set out, I'd been doing long one-day hiking for quite a few years. After in COVID, I decided that I was going to do something extraordinary to inspire people, because I hiked to raise money for a charity and realized that people weren't giving any more to charities. So I'm like, I'm going to do something extraordinary. I'm going to set myself up as a leader for this charity and go do something that's going to inspire people. So I set out to hike just 100 miles of the Appalachian Trail and ended up over the next 4 years actually hiking all 2,200 miles off it. In fact, it's 2,197.4, and I know this exactly because every bit of it counts, over 4 years. And as a result of spending that much time on the trail and having that much time to think about things, ended up with this book on leadership, White Blaze Leadership.
Well, that's amazing. Given, again, you had a lot of what I'll call me time as you were out there hiking and battling against the elements. And I know we're going to hear about what you thought through and how you pulled together really what I would call a really neat way to consider leadership.
Yeah, and I think that in today's world where it's so busy and the pace of change is so rapid, that actually finding time to think about any topic, even just what happened during the workday, let alone more bigger, larger topics like what is leadership, is really one of the starting points. How do we find time to even think about this? What does it mean? What do we mean by leadership? What kind of leader am I? Those are fairly big questions that most of us just don't spend any time on. And perhaps we can start with figuring out how we just even ask those questions. What is leadership?
I think it's a great topic, right? We talked about, just real briefly, a very long vision, right? Leading from a starting point to an ending point, the Appalachian Trail. But again, where does leadership actually show up, right? And it shows up every day. And where does it show up every day? In the workplace, right? So I think that's a topic for us maybe just to chat about for a minute or so. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and this is out in a story with the ending is this exact point, which is that leadership isn't in the big moments that happen, moments of crisis or moments of rapid change or moments that require you to step up and be more. Leadership actually happens in those small moments, in that every day, in in that point of time when you walk into a car or somebody walks into your room and asks you a question, or you get to see a colleague who's having a tough day. Those small things that happen every day, that's where you as a leader is developed. That's where you can take the time to understand those moments and how they reflect back on who you are as a leader. And I think that is ultimately what I took away from this whole 4 years of thinking about leadership was uh, that journey occurs, the baking of it occurs in the small moments. And those come together so that if a large moment does happen, a moment of crisis or drama or rapid change, you are well equipped to handle that. Because you know who you are as a leader, you know how to lead, and hopefully those around you look at you as a leader as well.
So, would it be fair for me to say, if I'm thinking about leadership in the workplace or leadership on the Appalachian Trail, if you're on the trail, every step you take is almost like those daily activities, those daily occurrences of pieces that you see, that you just mentioned, you absorb, whether you're leading because you saw an action or you heard something or you need to do something, building along the way. So it's almost like that trail walk that you're doing, walking, whether it's in the office, walking from the office to the car or walking along that trail, you're building a whole background of knowledge for leadership along the way.
Yeah, and I think this brings us to this topic of, like, if I ask you the question, what is leadership? You could pretty much answer that with a dictionary definition along the lines of it's the ability to inspire people to move in a common direction to a shared goal.
Mhm.
Something like that is what you're going to get for what is leadership. The question I think that we need to ask ourselves is, how does one lead? Who are you as a leader? Because I think the answer to that question is incredibly unique to every single person. There is no one way to lead. And if you go to a bookstore today and you go to the leadership session, you'll find 50 different people telling
Mhm.
you how to be a leader. You can lead this way or that way, or this is how to be a leader because I'm really important. So I know the right answer to that question. None of that is accurate. We're all leaders. We all have the capacity to lead, and for the most part, we all do lead in some way. Um, and when I talked earlier about taking the time to think about leadership, it's really about who are you as a leader? What are your core values? What matters to you? And Matt, your leadership is going to be different from my leadership, is going to be different from Mike's or anybody else listening to this. Some of them will overlap. Some of them going to just depend on who you are. There's no right or wrong answer to be a leader, but I will tell you that if you can figure out what your core values are from my book, your white blazes, if you can figure out what your white blazes are and lead from those, that will make you the best leader you can be.
Mike, what are
So
your thoughts
now you have me
on leading
curious.
today? Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, Peter, you have me curious in terms of, what are some of those posts that you were able to clearly articulate as you were going through what I would consider to be an amazing feat of all of those miles in the journey, and of course, managing against nature and all those surprises that you can have.
Yeah, so the idea of thinking about this from a leadership perspective, it did come from the idea that I knew I was out there trying to inspire people. And I thought I was thinking a lot about this idea of how to inspire people. Is inspiring people a leadership quality? Is that it? Is that who I am? And along the way, all 2,200 miles of the trail, every few hundred yards or so is a dab of white paint on the trees, or sometimes on rocks, or occasionally on sidewalks. And I got to understand that those white blazes, those marks really tell you something. They tell you you're on the trail, which is always a good thing. Because if you don't see them anymore, you're not on the trail. Not a good thing. Um, and there's slight different variations of them that will tell you the trail's going to turn left or it's going to turn right, or there's something ahead that you need to pay attention to. And I got to wondering, can I create a personal set of white blazes? my core values, that when I see them in my everyday in the small moments, I can think, oh, wait a moment, Peter, that is an opportunity for you to lead into one of your core values and lead with it. Could be a small thing, could be a bigger thing, but the more I can understand what my core values are, my white blazers, then the better I will be as a leader. And you know what? I hadn't really spent any time thinking about those at all. If you had asked me at the start of my journey, I probably would have had a slightly different set than I finished up with. But the ones I finished up with, I think, really are a good reflection of who I am as a leader. At least I would like to think so.
And,
And I know
and
you're probably going to ask me, all right, then what are those, Peter?
not only
So
did
yeah,
you
You read our mind.
that's not one
did
of
you
my
walk a lot
core
of miles, but
values.
you know what we're going to say. Yeah, what are those? What are they? So in plain English,
Yeah, so
what
mine
are
ended up being question, inspire, believe, value, and act.
they?
And I was able to take situations that occurred to me on the trail during those 4 years and think about them through that lens and say, oh, this is an opportunity for me to believe in somebody, or this is an opportunity for me to act. This is an opportunity for me to inspire. And so in the book, I take short vignettes, short stories of things that happened to me, or things I saw, or people that I met along the way, and really wrap those around my core values, and then tie those from a business perspective into how I see that we all have the opportunity to be better leaders in the workplace. And I think one of the key things that I learned about taking this time to inspect on leadership and what my values are, I came to understand that for the most part, we think about leadership as being outward facing. I lead a team, I lead a project, I lead a business, outward facing. And most of us, especially in executive roles, are very good at that. We're very good at leading outwards. You know what we're really bad at for the most part is leading inwards. And we need to take those same core values that we have and apply them every bit as much inwards as we do outwards. Like I'll give you a great example. I'm really good at believing in people. Like you guys are great. This podcast, what you've done with the Credit Research Foundation is fantastic. It needed you guys to make this happen. I believe in you. Look at that smile on you. You believe in yourselves as well. This is great. I'm really bad at believing in myself. Like, should I be on this podcast? Can I go out and hike? I still don't think I'm a great hiker. So those values and learning to project them outwards and inwards from a leadership perspective, I think is some of the incredible value that you can get by spending time thinking about this topic.
Well, I think it starts with yourself, right? You've got to believe in yourself, and then you've got to work with people, and you learn from them every day, right? And you find where their strengths are and where they got to work on their opportunities. And as leaders, it's pointing them out in the right way. As you were saying, like the signs along your path are helping people see where they do really well and where they might need to make some changes. And the other thing, at least that I found, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Peter, is most people that are really what I'll call exceptional, that are really driving hard, they never recognize how good they're doing because they're always thinking they could do better. And it's almost like an insecurity of really being this super achiever, but yet never setting back and looking and seeing how well, they've done or how they've managed their team to do extraordinary things. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Um, it's a great observation, and I was fortunate enough to work with a performance coach, sports psychologist along the way here. I got access to this extraordinary coach through mental health program that we had at work. And so a little bit of a sidebar here, but I think it's there's such value in thinking about coaching and understanding that, hey, being a leader doesn't mean it's something you do all on your own. I think one of the greatest qualities of really good leaders is understanding how to ask for help and how to wrap the right team around them. Not this idea that you know all the answers. And and I actually had a great number of conversations with my performance coach around this very topic. When I'd go out and I'd hike, say, 120 miles, and I meant to do it in 5 days, and it took me 6 days, and I'd be like, "What a loser you are, Peter," And it's like, wait a minute, how does this make any sense, right? And I think we have to get comfortable holding two truths in our brain at the same time, that hiking 120 miles in and of itself, extraordinary feat for most people, right? Should be proud of that. Should be really proud of that. Could I have done it faster? God, I could have, and that's okay. That's okay as well. And almost inevitably, I think that you'll find that everybody who is a leader has this natural conflict set up where they do amazing work, but they also think they could do better. And the reason they think that way is because they've done amazing. And so it's a natural conflict, and we've just got to get comfortable with holding that, I think. And in a work scenario, I talk, one of the examples I use in the book is about climbing this mountain. And I was heads down, and I had set myself a goal to get to the top of this pretty hard climb in a certain amount of time. I'm trudging away, trudge. I look over to my right, and there is a clearing, and I can see clean out over the Great Smoky Mountains, like all the way to the horizon. It looks like one of those jigsaw puzzles or something, where you just see the hill after hill after hill, and it's all blue, all gray. The sky, the mountains, everything is this almost uniform color. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to go and enjoy the view, and just take some time and be in the moment of where I am. Look where I got myself to. Look at this view that I given myself. And I took that time, gave myself some encouragement, and then went on and got to the top of the mountain. I got to the top of the mountain in about exactly the same amount of time as if I just kept my head down and trudged the whole way up. But when I got there, I was in such a better frame of mind. I was so much more appreciative for everything around me. And that was a great example of a lesson of taking the time to reflect on where you've been on any journey, no matter how big or small, and then moving forward, not resting on your laurels, but moving forward from there.
Peter, I love what you say about kind of being reactionary at times to things. How, I could have done this quicker. I could have been better. We don't really take the time, do we, as leaders, to sit back sometimes and just think about, in those quiet moments, the accomplishments that we've done, things that we could have done better, and how maybe I would have done that, or what are those new opportunities in front of us that maybe we want to attack. But we tend to be reactionary quite often, and just move to the next item instead of sitting back and analyzing and thinking about all of those great moments we've had, just like every footstep along the trail, right? I mean, if you could almost remember every one, it'd be great. Any tools that you recommend for doing that? Is it a matter of just taking some time out of your day and thinking, or time out of your trail walk and sitting down and keeping a notebook and writing things down? Not everybody has a coach that they can participate or act with, but any tools that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think that, and this was a really incredible technique that I did learn from my coach. So my biggest nemesis on the trail was big climbs. Oh gosh, I hated them. They were the worst. I'd get on I'd have like a 4,000-foot climb. It was going to take me 4 hours. I'd get on the climb. 20 minutes into the climb, I'd be slowing down, and you're like, you're the worst hiker in the world, Peter. You're the slowest. all these young kids would be going by me like mountain goats, and I'd be like, "Ah, you're just awful. You're never going to get to the top." And I'd do things like try to, count out 100 steps or just get to that next tree or whatever. And it was awful. And so I had a long conversation with my coach about this, and we went to this technique, which was in the morning at the start of the day, me thinking about what was going to come during the day. So just sipping my cup of coffee, thinking about the day, visualizing it out, but not trying to visualize me at the top of a mountain as you might, but more visualizing my emotions for the day and being able to lean into those so that I knew ahead of time that as soon as I got into that mountain, 20 minutes in, I'd be like, "You're the worst." My head would be down. I'd be trudging away. So the technique was to recognize that was going to happen, recognize when the emotion occurred, and then having some plan to deal with that emotion. In my case, it was always to go to gratitude, to start thinking about how grateful I was to be out there, to have the health, to be given the opportunity to be a leader in raising funds for the charity that I was out there for. And you know what? It didn't really change how much it sucked climbing up that mountain, but what it did change was my physical body. Instead of head down, I was head up. Because I was head up, my breathing was easier. Because my breathing was easier, I could climb up that mountain, and it just felt better. It was still 4 hours of suck, but I was actually better for it. Nothing changed except what was going on in my head. And so, how we get a hold of that, how we get a hold of the circus that plays out in there, has a lot to do with being able to lead from your own core values, what's going on up there. And that's all about emotions.
It's amazing how the brain and the body work together and
Right.
together.
Right. I mean, I think we see this often in business. I don't know about you guys, but we'll go into a meeting and you might be like, I'm not sure what I'm doing in here. All these people are super smart. They're way better than me at all of this. And then being able to say, "Oh, wait a minute. I've got 30 years experience of doing this. I got more experience than anybody in the room. I actually am pretty good at this. I know what I'm talking about." Being able to get control of that emotion in a meeting perspective. I think that's a good example.
Yeah, I
So
think we've all been
certainly
there
from
on
my
that one. It's a
perspective.
great
Oh,
example.
absolutely. So Peter, as you were sitting there reflecting in the morning before you were getting ready to go, I'd have to believe you encountered some hazards along the way, and probably some of them were unanticipated. And I think as leaders, that happens to us as well. But love for you to share maybe some stories on some hazards you came upon on your trail.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable when you go out into the wilderness. Unanticipated things are going to happen, and I know that your listening audience here, for the most part, deal in risk day in, day out, and that was no different for me going out on the trail. I thought a lot about risk. I had a lot of people who loved me who thought about risk for me as well. Right? You're not going out in the 100-mile wilderness on your own, are you? What about the bears? Well, actually,
There you
that's a
go.
really good question, right? What about the bears? So I did have a number of very close encounters with bears out there. But you know what? I'd done my homework. Not only had I done my homework, but I knew what to do in the moment because I prepared for that risk. Um, uh, the first time I came across a big old bear sitting in the middle of the trail, um, it was clearly his forest, and he was not afraid of me in any way, shape, or form. And time kind of slowed. I'd like to say I could remember things like how the bear smelled or something like that, but I can't. The only thing that I can remember is the beat of my heart because that was the only thing I could hear. And then I just went in a natural response, raise your voice, bang your hiking poles together, ask the ask the bear to kindly move along. So I put my best British voice on and I requested that the bear do exactly that. And finally he did. And I think that idea of preparation, of understanding risk. Now, a risk going to come along that you hadn't anticipated? Sure, they are. I got caught in thunder, really bad lightning storms that caused me to hide in a bear cave, which was pretty interesting. River crossings, where the water's up to your chest, fast moving cold water, knowing how to deal with that. Um, Not having enough calories on the trail to get you to where you're wanting to go. So there is an endless amount of risk over there, but I always found that preparation, true preparation, helped. You know what else? Having a satellite device with an emergency button on it also gave me a little peace of mind as well.
I would
Apparently,
imagine.
if you press the button, helicopters will come and rescue you, but I don't know if that happens. Thankfully, I never had cause to do that.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I
Yeah,
think
How do
he
you
was,
I
how do you
also,
prepare for things like that? A
yeah.
bear encounter, the high water, having the right food along the trail. There's so many different factors that could impact you. How do you kind of prepare yourself to deal with those in totality?
Um, I think a lot of it's mindset. Um, not not taking unacceptable risks, for example. So I was climbing one of the mountains in so the most trouble I got myself in out there, I was in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, which if you know anything about them, they are probably one of the most dangerous mountain ranges in the US, even though they're not that high. Just where they are, they create their own weather system, and people die on those every year. There are multiple fatalities every year. I was hiking there in August, and that year, in June of that year, Mount Washington, which is only 20, 30 miles away, somebody had died of hypothermia. That's how cold it can be up there. August 31st, I think it was, when I was up there, it was 33 degrees, snowing sideways. Visibility was 20, 30 feet. And I was in a little bit of trouble. Um, but thankfully, I could tell hypothermia was coming on. Thankfully, I had all my safety equipment with me and I was able to get down off the mountain. Um, that was the most trouble I got myself into while I was out there. And it was dangerous because if I'd made a wrong turn, hopefully the rescue services would come out, and that's not something that I wanted to
We'll
do in
test
any
the
way, shape,
waters
or
on
form.
that one.
But for the most part, I was very careful about risk. Don't push things. Tell people where you are. Tell people what you're going to do. I mean, this is good advice generally, right? In business, in
Mhm.
life. Tell people what you're going to do. Get other people's opinions on this. Ask the advice of people who've been there before you.
I think it's funny when I listen to your words and you talk about don't take the risk, but yet just the hike itself is a risk, but you prepared yourself mentally and physically. And I think one of my key takeaways is what you talked about is communication. Let people know what you're going to do, where you're going to go. Be prepared. Listen to what other folks have to say as well. It's an amazing journey, and being stuck on the top of a mountain in a snowstorm in August doesn't sound like it's a fun event,
Right?
but you took
Yeah.
all the
I
right
don't,
we're
I don't
wading
ever
through.
intend to do that again, Matt.
That's absolutely amazing. Amazing.
It's a great
Uh,
mindset and preparedness, right? It's just to help you manage through some of those things. And maybe just a little bit you could share with us on as you were reflecting and walking through and navigating change. What were you thinking about on the trail as you were walking through these different topographies and you've been through 2,000 miles?
So, I mean, change is such a important topic right now because I'm sure every single person listening to this right now feels the pace of change in their businesses, in the world, and everything that's going on. And we ask the questions, do we live in unprecedented time with what's going on with AI, for example, and its impact on certainly finance organizations in almost every major company are being impacted in some way, hopefully positively, by the possibilities of AI. And it's just this pace of change. So is this unprecedented? I mean, you could go back and ask the people where electricity was first invented, how that was going to change everything, or flight was first, when the Wright brothers first took off, how that was going to change, or the semiconductor was first invented, or the first cell phone, or the first internet browser. And what is changing is the pace of adoption. Technology and this incredible change we see, this incredible opportunity. And I'm optimistic. I think we should be optimistic about being able to leverage these things for the best. It's really interesting because when you step onto the trail, the forest operates at a different time scale. Even mediocre pine trees will live to be a couple hundred years old. By the time you get up into northern Maine, the pine trees up there, they'll live to be 600, 700 years old. And trees in the forest operate on a different time scale. It requires you to slow back down and think about change in a different way. Now, the forest has its four seasons, and probably the one thing I saw that really made me think about change the most out there was I was hiking in northern Pennsylvania and just came across these ruins of what was clearly a small village with trees growing up through foundations. And when I did my research later, it was a coal mining town from the late 1800s. And these were dotted up and down the northern Pennsylvania mountains because that's where the coal was until a few years later, the technology came along to be able to use coal that was of lesser quality to create steel. And all of those small towns in the mountains couldn't adapt. They couldn't change. And they just disappeared. Now, that little town I was in, it had 1,000 people in it. And 20 years later, no one was left in that town. There was no way for them to adapt. They didn't know how to adapt. And it's interesting if you look at the Fortune 500, and I hope I get these figures right here, but in the 65 years that Fortune 500's been around, only 10% of the companies are still on it. That means 90% of the companies have disappeared. And if you look at that since the year 2000, so in the last 26 years, only half of the companies that were on the Fortune 500 in the year 2000 are still on the Fortune 500.
Wow.
And I would argue that it's a lack of ability to change, or more importantly, a lack of leadership's ability to accept the fact that change is inevitable and not fight against it, but say, how do we lean into that? How do we help everybody deal with change? Because change is hard. There's no doubt about that. And I think as leaders, that's one of the most important things that we can do is help everybody see that change brings opportunity, but only if you're prepared to accept that.
Wow. Why do you think that happens? Like those organizations, those Fortune 500 over time, people have good ideas in those organizations to help them change. Why do you think some of those ideas tend to die off or don't make it to the top to allow them to morph into whatever is required for the next chapter of their existence?
Yeah. I mean, hubris has to be one of the probably biggest culprits. Did you see the movie on, it was the cell phone company that we all had back in the day. See, I can't even remember the name
The
now.
Nokia or one of those?
Yeah,
Oh,
but it had the
BlackBerry,
buttons on it.
The BlackBerry.
BlackBerry, right?
Ah, there we
So a
go.
great movie about that. That is all about hubris. They were like, nobody would ever use something without buttons on it.
Mhm.
And they basically went from one of the biggest companies in the world to being obsolete within 18 months. And we
Well, you
saw
look
that.
at Kodak.
One of my other
Kodak.
favorite examples is Blockbuster, right? I mean, Blockbuster, um, you know, they just want to charge you a rewind fee. And they had no idea what was coming because they thought we'd all still go to a physical store on a Friday and buy our Twizzlers and get our movie.
Yep,
Right. So
yep.
hubris, and I think hubris can come down to this lack of ability of understanding that change is coming, whether you like it or not. It's going to come.
I mean, the other one is Kodak. I mean, they actually they discovered or came up with the digital camera, but it would have impacted their mature business, so they never pursued it.
Yeah, I mean, the world is replete with examples. We could go on and on with these. And I think as a leader, it's being prepared to be open to ideas and not just being, that'll never work, but ask somebody to explain to you why it's going to work. What's
Mhm.
the opportunity? Why should we invest in this?
I love that thought as to ask why. Maybe in those quiet moments when you're on the trail or you're walking to your car from the office, maybe ask why, or ask yourself why, or ask somebody else why.
Yeah.
And ask multiple people the same question around the topic to see what answers you get. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
and that was actually, why is or question is one of my core leadership values, and I love asking the question why. There's a great engineering term called five whys, which is if you ask why 5 times in a row, you're going to
Mhm.
get a lot closer to the truth of something than just letting it go just because someone told you it is.
It's amazing. Five whys. That's one for our listeners to look up
There you go.
and utilize. Yeah. Mike, you want to talk about
You mean I'm just
leading
gonna
without.
one quick point on that. So just because isn't a good good response for that? Because we always did it that way?
Uh, because we always did it that way is probably
Yeah,
one of the worst responses that you can come up with. I think I actually used
absolutely.
that example early in the book. Um, I think I'm talking about my backpack. When I first started out, my backpack probably weighed 50 pounds. And because I didn't know any better. By the time I ended up, I was going out with a pack that was maybe 20 pounds. I was faster, I was lighter, I was more nimble. Everything was better. Imagine if I'd never changed and tried to carry 50 pounds for those whole 4 years every time I went out for a section hike. It would have been miserable. I would never have finished. Just because I'd always done something one way, um, yeah, that wouldn't have worked.
Bad approach. Bad approach. And you asked why, right? Why do I need this? I'm sure. Why do I need this particular extra weight? And came up with some answers and
I did.
being
I
lighter and
would
more
pull
nimble.
stuff out and ask why. Sometimes the answer to that would be risk. Like I always took two water filters with me because the risk ratio versus the reward rate ratio, if I lost my water filter, was significantly in the balance of carrying an extra few ounces.
Yeah,
So I always carried an extra water filter. I carried an extra lighter for myself. Yeah.
very good. Like, why don't we change gears a little bit? You want to talk about maybe leading without authority? I think it's a good transition for us right now. Talk about risk and reward.
I think it's a great subject. One of my old bosses used to say, even if the receptionist, they don't have to have leader in their name to lead. And it's leading without the title or the authority. Maybe, Peter, I know that's one of the pieces that you go into in the book. If you could kind of share with us where you're coming from when it goes to leading with authority.
Yeah, I mean this is a fascinating topic because it really goes to the heart of what we mean by leadership. And there's a big difference between managing people and believing you're a leader because leadership is actually about people following. And that power lives with those people who are following, not with you. And so it doesn't matter if you don't have the big corner office or you don't have the title that you think you have. What you say, the words and actions that you take are actually what define you as a leader. And the more that you can align words and actions with your core values, with your white blazes, the better you will be seen as a leader as well. And I get to teach a class at University of Pennsylvania in leadership around the White Blaze leadership book, and I stress that with everybody in that class as they're about to graduate the capstone leadership class, which is you really have got to understand the difference between management and leadership. And you get to be a leader day one you step into a new firm, even if you are on the lowest rung in that firm, because it's how you walk, how you hold your head, the words you use, how you treat other people, what you do in those moments when no one's looking. That is what is going to define you as a leader.
And we all lead at certain points in time. And like you said, no matter where we fit in an organization, everybody leads in some aspect of what they do. And it's so critical. Like we said, no matter what we do, whether what we say, how we walk, what we do in our own time, that's true leadership for folks and really sets people apart. Yeah, it's a mindset change, isn't it, for people?
So much of this conversation about leadership is about a mindset. It's about mindset. Whether you need to change that or not kind of depends. You might be a great leader already, but I think thinking about your core values and asking yourself, am I the best leader I can be? Probably will change some aspects of how you think about that. And even if you are the best leader right now, there's still work you can do to be a better leader. I was just reading this great story about President Carter, Jimmy Carter. He was an extraordinary leader through his whole career. He started out in the Navy, did some remarkable stuff there, but his whole ethos to leadership came from a single moment when he was graduating Naval Academy, looking to go work on early stage nuclear submarines. And the captain who was interviewing him at that time asked him if he was proud of his time at the Naval Academy. And he's like, yeah, I finished 57th out of, I know, 800 or something like that. Really proud about it, as he should have been, Jimmy Carter. And this captain said to him, did you do your best? And it was like, it put him back on his feet because he
Mhm.
thought about it. And I had to answer that question. No, I didn't do my best. And I sort of like that question. That story resonated with me because we talked about this earlier. Anybody who's a leader is inherently going to think that they can do better. And that is exactly what that story that Jimmy Carter told. So he spent the rest of his career thinking, am I giving my best? And yet and there was no point he probably thought he had given his best because he thought he could do better. And so when we think about are we successful as being leaders, we can always be better. Even if we think we're the best we can be, we can always be better. And that comes back to, I think, understanding our core values, understanding how we lead from those, and then really being able to think about the difference we make in people's lives, in our business is that we work with, in our families and our communities, where our leadership impacts as well.
That's fantastic. So would you say it's a mindset change for folks versus just saying I'm middle of the pack and versus reflecting on, yeah, did I really give it my all? Is it clearly a mindset change for people?
Yeah, it is great. It's a great question to ask yourself, right? And
Yeah.
and perhaps if you didn't, that's okay too, because there may be limitations, and it's understanding those as well. Hey, I could do better if I had more time. If I got off work half an hour earlier, perhaps I could go run. If I didn't do that meeting, perhaps I could do this meeting. So it brings you to this idea of prioritizing. And then maybe you find out that you're actually not that good at prioritizing your workload and you might need some help with it. So
Yeah.
thinking about how all these pieces fit together can perhaps help make you become a better leader along the way.
Yeah, sometimes it's about the big picture, not just the isolated moments. You got to
Right,
take them all into consideration.
right.
This has been fantastic. Mike, do you have any other questions? I know we're bumping up against time. Anything you want to add?
Yeah. I just wanted to thank Peter for sharing his wisdom with us and all of those learnings and that really the insight that you brought back based on your 2,000-mile plus journey. We appreciate that. And again, the name of the book is White Blaze Leadership. For those of you that might want to go deeper, it's offered out on Amazon. And I think there are some great additional stories out there that can help folks better understand what they could be thinking about. Leadership is one of those a continuous improvement soft skill, right? We're never the best leaders because there's always something else you can learn on how to become even a better leader. And we wanted to thank you, Peter, for bringing all that to us in a book and being able to share some of your personal experiences to help others become even better. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Hey, you're very welcome, Mike. You know, and I would leave you with a couple of things here as well. So, um, we talked about the Appalachian Trail being this super hard thing, 2,200 miles. But I would say to everybody on the call, never let anybody else define what hard is. You know, your hard might be somebody else's easy, right? I know people who have hiked the Triple Crown, which is, 3 times the distance I hiked. They probably looked at what I did as easy. So never ever let anybody else define what your hard is. For somebody on your team, might just be getting out of bed today. And if you can help them accomplish that, what an incredible gift as a leader that is. And so that is one thing, never letting somebody define hard for you. Two, if you're listening to this podcast today, you have you have all the privileges in life, so much more than most don't. So make a difference with it, right? No, don't just be a leader at work, but be a leader to those in your community, be a leader to those in your family, be a leader to everybody in the credit research industry. You have more to give. And I would encourage everybody to step into that as a leader. And I would also encourage everybody to go out there and be awesome today, because it's going to be a great day.
I love the positive close on there, Peter. I want to thank
Absolutely.
you as well. Just not only the discussion around leadership, but the thoughts about the journey you have taken. And as you read the book, it's fascinating. It's remarkable, and we can all do something, as you said, in our communities to make the world a whole lot better. I think that's an absolute wrap for us today on where credit is due. If you like today's subject, a couple of things. Go out, buy the book. If you see any other podcasts out there with Peter, take a listen. It's always fascinating. And don't forget to like us and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Podbean. Hope you have a great day. Thank you, everybody. Peter, that was fantastic.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.